like to welcome you to Webinar Wednesday. It's fantastic to have you. I've been on the docket for a long time, so I'm excited to have your presentation happening today, and the floor is yours whenever you are ready.
How wonderful. Thank you very much, Bethany. I believe that we are ready to go, and if you can just quickly confirm you're seeing my slides, I'm going to jump right in.
Yes, ma'am. We can see them just fine.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for inviting me into NAGC to offer this webinar. As Bethany said, I'll stop numerous times during the webinar and I invite your questions. I've shared my contact information on the last or second to last slide, and I will always welcome a phone call or an email from anybody who's joining us today. So our topic is emailing customers and colleagues, which is both a humble and a noble task, writing emails to customers and colleagues, and then our subtitle today, what internal communicators can learn from the contact center world. And I'm going to introduce myself and tell you about my journey in and out of the contact center or customer service world. Here's a classic consultant slide, classic indeed. That's a photo of me, a photo of my website, and a photo of my blog across the top of the page. Again, my name is Leslie. My company's called eWrite. I formed the company in 1996. Our mission is to help people learn to write well at work. That's our broad mission. And on this slide, I just gathered some of the logos of the government agencies I've worked with in the last couple of years. I'm not a federal or local government employee, but if you wouldn't mind, I would be honored to be considered a cousin, because a lot of the work that eWrite does, we're based in the DC area, is to offer customized writing courses for government agencies. And every agency you see listed here I've worked with within the last 18 to 24 months. So these are frequent clients of mine, and as a writing coach and a writing instructor, I feel relatively up to speed about the challenges that internal communicators face when writing in government agencies. But this slide represents some of the work that I've done in a different world. One big portion of the work I've done over the last 3 or 4 years is help airlines' customer service teams write better email to customers. Now, if we were all in the same room and I could see your face and I said these 3 words, airlines, customer, and service in a row, I know you would be rolling your eyes at me, because I can't think of another type of business that has a worse reputation for customer service in 2017. But behind the scenes of some of the most dramatic events we see on airplanes are thousands and thousands of customer service agents writing emails to customers. And teams of them answer customers' emails before the customers have traveled, and even larger teams of them answer customers' complaints after the customers have traveled. And so today, when I'll be offering some advice about writing great internal communications for government communicators, I'm going to have in mind the people who work in contact centers, like the ones who work in the contact centers for these airlines. I'll have them in mind, and I want to tell you a little bit about their world and how their writing practices might inform yours. Okay, so that's the premise. It's an odd one, but not an unreasonable one. What can the writing life of one group of people who work in customer service and contact centers, inform the writing life of another group of people who manage internal communications for government agencies? So today, our webinar will cover these 4 topics with plenty of examples and plenty of time for questions. Topic number 1, what is the contact center world? As I've added to our session title, what is the contact center world and what can you learn from it? Topic number 2, write a great subject line. This is the bedrock writing principle of all excellent email communication, whether you're writing blast emails, marketing sweater sale at Macy's, or whether you're writing to internal colleagues. Put the bottom line up front in the first paragraph of your email. That's a writing practice I know will achieve a great deal for getting a good response to your internal communications. And finally, how to create and why to create reusable email templates. In this regard, in point number 4, or part number 4, this is where the customer service or contact center world gets some of its harshest criticism. When we're customers and we email a company for help and we get a copy and paste canned answer or form letter, we really don't appreciate that very much. But an email built wholly on a template is one that's likely to irritate or aggravate a customer. But we can use templates well. Customer service organizations do use templates well, some of them do, and I want to suggest that pre-written or templated email content is perfectly appropriate, practical, and can improve the quality of your communication. So there we have it, the 4 topics for today. The first one I'll address very briefly, and then we'll get moving and talk about great internal communications. So what is the contact center world, and what can your team learn from it? Your teams learn from it. Contact centers are large teams of email writers who are employed in large numbers, and they're the written version of the 1-800 phone number we might call for customer service. When Bethany was introducing me, she mentioned how we might call our credit card company or our cell phone provider for customer service. All I can say is good luck with that, or we might email them. But the government has hundreds of customer service organizations. Just like any corporation would have contact center, the government has hundreds of them. I have worked with a few of them. So for example, at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, they have, I believe, 11 separate contact centers answering customers' questions by email and by phone, and sometimes by chat, sometimes by text. And these are the communities I'm talking about. I've given you a photo to look at here. It looks like a cubicle farm, kind of a center of desperation, not a contact center, but I don't want to convey desperation. These are people who are answering emails well to customers who they may know a little bit or may not know at all. So contact centers are places where large teams of email writers are employed to answer customers' questions all day long. The second thing that's really important to know about contact centers is that the managers of the people who we see here in these cubicles, managers in contact centers measure email success. They measure whether the email that each agent sends, did that email achieve its goals? And this is a notion that I'd really like to introduce today. Sometimes we think our emails to our colleagues didn't meet their goals because our colleagues are stubborn or hateful or lazy or something like that. But perhaps we would wonder if our emails meet the goals because we hadn't written them well enough. They're not easy enough to understand or easy enough to follow. The measure of email success that contact centers use is a very nerdy term. They call it first contact resolution, or they sometimes will even call it FCR. They measure this. Did the customer get a resolution to the problem on the first response via email? That's what they're measuring. And though it's often really difficult to achieve first contact resolution, it's a worthy measure to take of success in communication. So let's pretend the 2 people we see working here, they work for an insurance company, and you write them an email and say, I'd like to add a beneficiary to my life insurance policy. If they explain how to do that in their reply and you're able to do it, then they achieved first contact resolution. You didn't have to write back to them to find out how to do it or to correct a misunderstanding. They wrote a quality email that helped you resolve your reason for contact on the first try. So this is an interesting measure of success, isn't it? Do we achieve first contact resolution, or our emails to our internal communications to our colleagues, are they one and done? First contact resolution is the nerdy term for measure of success. The nickname for first contact resolution is one and done. Our goal is to write one and done email, and it's contact center employees' goal also to write one and done email. So I hope I've laid the groundwork for this comparison. I know you don't work in a contact center. I know you're not employed to answer customers' questions via email all day long, every day. But the measures of success in the contact center environment are interesting for us outside the contact center environment. Okay, so I hope I've established the connection there. Before I move on to the next part of the webinar, I just wanted to let you know that at DigitalGov, the GSA's online community for all things online, they do host the Government Contact Center Council, which is the G3C, or if you're like me, you'll always forget and call it the GC3, the 3GC or whatever, but you can learn about this community of practice, and if you're interested in participating, this is where to go. DigitalGov has the instructions for how to join the Government Contact Center Council. Okay, and with that, let us move on. Whether we work in a contact center and write emails to customers, or we work in an internal communications role in a government agency, no matter what, we know people aren't reading our emails, and I use these three graphics just to say how. How do we know people aren't reading our emails? Well, on the left, sometimes they pick up the phone and they call us, even though the email we've just sent them answers the question they're asking us on the phone. Sometimes they email us right back to ask us another question, even though, like I said, the email we just wrote them answers that question. And then on the right, I've used the icon for a little to-do list. Sometimes we know people aren't reading our emails very carefully or at all because they don't do what we ask them to do. We might ask them 2 or 3 simple questions, and the email either doesn't answer any of them or answers one of them. This is really frustrating if you are in internal communications. If you write an email, you want to get your message across and ensure that you have first contact resolution, that you don't have to field numerous questions when those were answered in the email you wrote. So why aren't people reading our emails? And my theory is not, as I said earlier, it's not that people are hateful or lazy or can't be bothered. My theory, and I think it's a great theory, is that email readers are just simply overwhelmed. And if you get an email like this email I'm showing you here, you are overwhelmed, and you probably are not motivated to read it at all. So I'm going to set this up quickly, and then I'll give you a moment to read it, and we'll use this sample. Use this sample later in our webinar. All the emails I'll show you today are real. It's a firm principle of my pedagogy. I only show real examples, but I've scrubbed them of identifying information. So Mike Mansfield is just a name I made up, and all staff at Prime Products is just a company name I made up. But the email itself is real. So here's an email that I chose this because it's a relevant internal communications example. This is an all-staff email, something I assume, a type of email I assume most of you write quite often. And this writer has given us quite a lot to read and not put the message in a very readable place. So now I'll be quiet for just a moment. You can read through this email quickly, please. I'll be quiet while you read. Okay, so would you chat in right now? Just go over to the chat box, and would you chat in and agree? Tell me whether you agree that this is a typical email, and if so, why? Do you agree that this is a typical email, and if so, why? Can you chat in? I'll look for a few people to answer this question.
Thanks, Leslie. I will
You'll field
get a
some
couple
answers.
of these responses, and I'll send them along to you.
Okay, or you just read them out if people are chatting in. They might be saying, hey, wait, I didn't know I'd have to chat in, but I'll give you the chance right now. Do you agree that this is a typical email, and if so, why?
Okay, so we've got one folk who says, yes, a typical email. People are always complaining of being hot and cold. That was from Tristan Anderson. And Bethany Hornbeck would say, yes, I often have a space heater sitting at my feet. Someone else, Elizabeth Rowe, says, fairly typical for a non-writer, uses way too many words, exclamation point.
Okay, and there we have it. I think this is the essence of the issue. This person has written an extremely long email for the topic that he wants to cover, and isn't it? It's absolutely adorable that two of the three people who spoke up are talking about emails about space heaters. It could have been about anything, but this email happens to be about an unwelcome topic, as in I know you're chilly, or I know you're sweltering, but you can't have anything in your office that adjusts the temperature. And when internal communicators have to convey difficult information, unwelcome information, these bad email writing habits grow more intense. So I believe that poor Mike Mansfield has written this extremely long email and put his message down, his main point down at the end, because he believes that this is unwelcome information, and he'd as soon start with a long-winded, I feel your pain explanation as get to the point. And this would not work in a contact center. If they wrote an email of this length and this difficulty to a customer, they would never achieve first contact resolution. So this is an example where writing behaviors that wouldn't survive there shouldn't survive in our internal communication. So our assumptions are we can learn a lot from people who write emails in contact centers, and our assumptions are that most of the people who get our emails are overwhelmed. Even if you don't write this much when you communicate with your colleagues, other people do. So the inbox is kind of a dreary place where a person has to do lots of work. Okay? So let's move on. The first part of my advice to you is that you can improve the chances of first contact resolution if you spend a good amount of your writing craft on the subject line of your email, because it's the first thing your recipients will see, and they see your subject line in, I'll call the inbox the email emergency room. They see it where they're doing triage. Read now, read later, read never. So the subject line is the most important part of any email. If you don't write a useful subject line, then recipients make erroneous decisions about when and whether to read it. So you may have written a good email and they would not even know because the subject line didn't help them enough. A good subject line has to help readers answer these three questions. And if the subject line helps them answer two, that's not good enough. It has to answer all three. So the questions are, when should I read this email? Sometimes we're asking, should I read it right away? Could it wait until after lunch? But in italics, I elaborated, could I delete this email without reading it? So when should I read this email? And then is never an option. And in fact, that's an appropriate response for some emails if you don't need the information. Second question, the subject line must answer, what is the email about? And third, the subject line has to help the recipient predict, will I need to do anything? Whenever you're writing an email, whatever type of email, if you want the reader to do something, do beats no. It's like a game of rocks, paper, and scissors. Do always trumps no. So if you have an action item for the recipient, then they should be able to predict it from the very subject line. Now, I know these are high standards for subject line writing, so I want to show you a few subject lines for discussion and then a method for writing subject lines this way. Okay, here on this slide, I listed 10 subject lines. They're not in any order of importance. I just numbered them so they'd be easier to talk about. And I'm interested if you think any of these subject lines are good enough to meet the standards I offered on this slide. When should I read it? What's it about? And do I need to do anything? I'll give you a minute to look through these 10. And if you like any of these subject lines and you think, yes, they are good enough to answer those 3 questions for the recipient, chat in and tell us which number is good enough. Do you like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Which is good enough? Any responses, Bethany?
Hold on, we're going to see if Meg sends some along. I would say I like number 1. And I like number 5 and maybe number 6, although I don't know what the heck a potential commuting problem tomorrow is. Sarah Hum likes number 1 also. Michael Eulis likes 10, 6, 1, and 5.
I call that great minds think alike.
Yeah, Elena Andrew also likes number 10.
Okay.
And Tristan Anderson likes number 1. So we've got some votes for 1, 10, and a few in between.
All right, wonderful, and I'm glad. I respect everyone for not voting for number 8. It's a great topic, but not a great subject line. So I've used color on these same subject lines, and I want to feature the ones I think are really good. The first one, last day to order, computer at a discount, and then the calendar date. I believe this is an excellent subject line. I could delete this subject, the email, quite easily if I don't need a computer. I don't want to buy a computer. So sometimes internal communications involves sharing offers like this with employees. This is an excellent subject line. If I'm going to do something, I'm assuming there will be instructions on how to order that computer. I believe number 5 is an excellent subject line, and I think so because we know that we do need to respond here. We do need to answer, yes, I can attend, no, I cannot attend. The requirement for a response is all hanging on that little frail question mark, so we might want to rethink the order of information, but I think the words there are great. I put number 4 and number 10 in green because I want to convey that to me they're not good enough. They're nearly there, but they're not good enough. Number 4 is a classic vague subject line because I can't tell whether the person named Eddie Breeze has been paid or this person has not been paid. The email could say either one. The email could say, hi, I need your help getting this contractor paid. He hasn't been paid. Or it could say, hi, I just wanted to let you know the payment went through. Those kinds of subject lines never achieved first contact resolution, and they cause recipients of internal communications to kind of glaze over or gloss over and not attend to what's being said. Number 10 is a thorough subject line, but it's probably too thorough. It lets us talk about how long is too long, how long is long enough. This subject line could easily be edited to make it short enough to be seen in most people's inbox, whether they're looking at emails on a mobile phone, on a tablet, on a laptop, or a desktop. What we see on 10 now is way too long. So there's a lot of double up writing in number 10. I would edit it to something like 2017 materials need your review by Jan 23, and then we would be able to fit it all on a, I don't know, 24, 25 characters. It would be able to be seen. Okay? So a good subject line, to keep things positive, a good subject line helps people open emails and read them appropriately. A poor subject line is costly to a writer, and this is something that a contact center manager would never endure because we want to resolve the customer's issue in the first contact. This subject line is really, really bad, and it makes me feel very sad for old Samantha Peck, who wrote this. She's written an email to a group of people. It's not to just one recipient, and these are volunteers, so we want to be respectful of their time. And her subject line just says, looking forward. Now, she may mean looking forward to seeing you. She may mean we're looking forward to our teen mentoring event on Saturday, but either way, her subject line is completely inadequate. This will not, it's likely people won't even read this email, or they will not be able to predict whether they need to do anything at all. I revised the subject line so that it's explicit and it's clear. I called it Reminder, Teen Mentoring Information Session on Saturday, December 12. Now, this method of writing a subject line is the one I'm going to show you in just a moment, but I've chosen the word reminder because this email is a reminder. And by calling it a reminder, I hope I'm conveying to the people who receive it, you don't need to do something in response to this email. This email does not require an action. I just wanted to tell you a second time something I had told you before. Okay? So here is my handy-dandy, most beloved method for writing a subject line that improves first contact resolution. My approach is I draft the email itself, and then I ask myself, what is this email? I want a noun that will describe the email. And here's a list of, I don't know how many I gave you, 14 of these or 16 of these. Here's a list of 16 answers to the question, what is this email? So if your email is a reminder, which oddly isn't on this list but was on the previous slide, then you would use reminder as the first word in your subject line. If your email is an invitation, you might use the word invitation as the first word in your subject line. So here when we see sample 5, which we said we liked, join me at the executive breakfast, we could have also written invitation to the executive breakfast. That would have worked. If your email is a request, you should certainly use that as the first word, because words like request or recommendation or instructions, these words cue to the recipient of the email, you need to do something. And we don't want people to have to open the email to figure that out. So again, my method is I write the email and then I proceed to write the subject line. The first word I use in the subject line is my answer to the question, what is this email? Is this email a request? Is this email an update? Is this email an agenda? Okay, that's my method. And I'll show you a couple of samples right here. Here's an email from someone I called Catherine Howe. She works at a university I made up, and she's writing to a whole project team of people. And the more recipients you have for any communication, the more careful you need to be with the subject line, because people are different one to another, and you need to help them make use of your email, and that you absorb those differences in the explicitness of the subject line. In this email, Catherine's telling people about a resource, a historical society collection of photographs or images, digital images that they can use. And she's written the subject line, Historical Society Photographs. It's not good enough. It's not explicit. It might make me wonder, were they destroyed in a fire? Are they available for me to use? What do you want to tell me about historical society photographs? So I edited the subject line. I reviewed the email and called it a recommendation. And then I continued, download historical society photos for class use. Okay? So the subject line would, in this case, I certainly hope, encourage the recipient to read the email. But if they did not read the email and they decided not to read it, they would have made a full decision, an informed decision, because the subject line was so clear. Here's another example of a very troublesome kind of email that we often get into when we've been emailing back and forth with someone. Larry is writing to Wendy. The subject line says product descriptions for the 2017 print catalog. But if you read this short 2 or 3 sentence email, you'll see that he's not writing about that at all. He says, Wendy, I wanted to let you know we're about to change our accounts payable process. I'm going to get your pricing agreement signed. I don't have somebody for you to contact about that, but I'm working on it for you. So this is a case where the subject line is a 100% disconnect from the content of the email. And this type of writing gives us gray hair because we don't know why Larry has this subject line. Is it because he used an old email and just hit reply? Is it because they've been going back and forth for so long that the topic has drifted? Either way, I think this is a great example to note why the subject line will cause problems. Overall, in this email, Larry wants Wendy to wait patiently. He's working on something. He needs a little bit more time to give her what she wants or to answer her, to give her a final answer. But the subject line doesn't convey that at all. A contact center would never send a subject line email to an email that didn't match the content of the email. So here's the edit I've given. Follow up on your pricing agreement. And when the subject line of an ongoing email exchange no longer represents the topic, it's a good idea to change the subject line. Okay? So we are ready to move on to the next section in the webinar. I'm going to take a deep breath and ask if there are any questions so far.
Sure. We do have one question, actually. And folks, if you have any other questions, please go ahead and send those in, and we will run them by Leslie. Rania Botros asks, what do you use to track internal communication, such as readership views, etc.? I don't know if you're going to talk about that upcoming or if you'd like to address that question now.
Actually, I don't have that covered in the webinar, but I always, if those types of internal communications I'm thinking are more like newsletters, that, you know, if you were a full-blown marketer for a product, you would have opt-in newsletters. When you're an internal communications expert in a government agency, you probably have distribution groups instead of opting into newsletters. So my preferred measure of success for any internal communications are the actions people take as a result of the communication. But probably we're left with open rate as a durable measure. Open rate is shockingly low, and I think the only way that we don't leave work sobbing into a handkerchief when we realize a communication has some kind of 17% or 23% open rate, something really low like that, is that we have to compare those types of internal communications to direct mail. And direct marketers who send, you know, flyers to your postal mailbox don't cry if you recycle them, and we shouldn't cry if our emails are getting a market, or if our subscription type emails are getting a market acceptable rate, which would be something in the double digits and probably not over 22 or 23% open rate. But at the risk of saying, whoa, that's another topic altogether, I have to say, whoa, another topic altogether. So perhaps a topic we can take up one-to-one after the webinar. Any other questions, Bethany?
Nope, that's all we have for now, so please proceed with part 3.
I will, gladly. So this next writing strategy for internal communications is the strategy of putting the bottom line up front. If you've been around a government agency, especially if you have colleagues who are in the military, you'll know Leslie didn't make that up. That BLUF principle, bottom line up front principle, is one that military writers in military agencies are always taught, and I think it's a great communication principle for us when we're emailing our colleagues internally. I'm using this image of this beautiful vacation home right on the shore to say that the opening of your communication, of that email, the opening is beachfront property, and you should never waste the beachfront property with a structure that doesn't belong there. These lucky people put this beautiful vacation home right up against the water. They did not put the garage up against the water. They did not put the little deck with all of the garbage cans on it right up against the water. They put their beautiful window and right there so that they could see the ocean. And that's how we should think of our emails. The nicest real estate in the email is the beginning, and one of the most practical strategies for getting your message across is putting your main message, your bottom line, up front right in the beginning of your email. Here's an example of an email that has a slender little bluff paragraph and a good subject line, and together these make for excellent employee internal communications. This is another all-staff email. It comes from someone I called Eleanor Richter, who's a human resources manager at a company called NRS, and she's given her email the subject line, employee benefit, purchase ComNet computers at a discount. We saw a similar subject line to this in the list of 10. And in her first paragraph, she has encapsulated everything else she has to say in the rest of the email, and in doing so, she's written a bluff paragraph, a bottom line up front paragraph. It's a summary of the email without being called out as a summary. We could also nickname it an executive summary or an abstract. Everything that follows elaborates on the little slender paragraph she's written at the beginning. And again, this is a wonderful, wonderful practical writing principle. You'll notice that Eleanor's email in general is quite orderly. It's calming because we can scan the headings. The units, the little paragraphs are approximately the same size. It's quite a pleasant email to look at and an easy one to read. But what I really want us to focus on is this bluff paragraph, bottom line, up front, right at the beginning. Okay? And here's poor old Mike Mansfield. We felt his pain, and his pain caused us pain. He has a bottom line up front, but unfortunately, he has a bottom line, but unfortunately, it's not up front in his email. It's actually down at the bottom. And if we had to make an acronym, bottom line at bottom is BLAB, and we are not in favor of BLAB. So what I've done here with an overlay, I've given him a better subject line and a better bluff paragraph. He's written policy reminder, so that's his subject line, remove space heaters or fans from work areas by September 1. This connects this particular email to the other emails or other notices that employees have received that they need to remove those space heaters. To me, the subject line broadcasts loud and clear, yes, you have to do something. And the subject line also might be one that allows the recipient to delete the email without reading the detail. It's not such a subtle message. Get rid of your space heater or your fan. Here's the deadline. In the gray background, I've written a bluff paragraph, and this bluff paragraph could be the entire email for a strictly edited, shortened version, or it could just be added to the current email so that and presented right up there on the beachfront property, right at the beginning of the email. And then we could probably take out a good amount of the blah, blah, blah Mike Mansfield put in this email to begin with. So the first sentence of the bluff is a polite one. Remember, he has a difficult message. People aren't going to be happy to hear about this. The second sentence also sets the context. The third sentence, I need to remind everyone that our policy and our lease prohibit us from having these, starts to come in for the main point, and the last sentence is the upshot, the bluff of the bluff, which is you can't keep that space heater after September 1. You have to get rid of it, or we will get rid of it. So the notion is that a good internal communications email has a bluff paragraph that the recipient can recognize as a strong, clear main message. You present the bluff paragraph first, even though many of us as writers will write it last. we'll save writing the bluff paragraph to the end because it's not that easy to write. Okay? So we take this advice from the contact center because their communication success is strictly measured, and a bluff paragraph increases the chances that we won't get repeat contacts on the same topic from people we've emailed. Okay? Now before I launch into templates, I'm going to take a deep breath and a drink of water and ask if there are any other questions. Bethany, anyone have a question?
We do not have any further questions at the moment, so we could go ahead into part 4 and again invite folks to put their questions into their questions box for us, and then we can talk about these reusable email templates that don't sound like templates.
Okay, cool. I'm going to proceed. So templates are okay, just like bakery cake is okay. You don't have to make every cake homemade, and if you're like me, sometimes you might, go to the bakery and ask for the cake that's a little bit dented or messed up so that you can pass it off as homemade. I'm not above that. I have done that in the past. Templates, another word for canned answer, another word for form letter. And some people, in fact, even call these knowledge base articles. A template is the word that I'm going to use for anything that's pre-written that you can combine with free text or freshly written writing in an email and reuse when you're communicating with your internal customers. So if it's the goal here, I'm going to torture the metaphor, the goal here is to serve delicious cake. Whether you made it yourself or not is not the main point. It's that the cake is delicious and the people you've invited to eat it are going to enjoy it. Same is true for your emails. If you have reusable content that you can copy and paste and reuse appropriately, please do. Life is short. Don't have a conscience problem. Templates are fine as long as they meet the reader's needs. Why? Why are they okay? Because templates help you respond more quickly. They help you answer quickly, and they help you communicate the first communication quickly. They help you write what I've nicknamed fiddly content accurately. Fiddly content is content that's difficult to keyboard, information with dates and times and addresses and links in it. If you have to use that type of information regularly, it's more efficient to pre-write it. Your company, your agency has tons of carefully written content you could reuse in your FAQs, in other types of documents, even in presentations. There's information that's been well edited and well reviewed. Why not reuse it? And my last point I made earlier, life is short. Please don't keyboard anything over and over again. I try to set like a tripwire in my own awareness. If I'm typing something twice in one day, I need a template. Why would I want a big old case of carpal tunnel? And also, typing is boring. I don't want to retype anything. I want to be able to reuse content. My job is hard enough as it is. I don't want to copy. I don't want to recreate something that I could reuse. So I wanted to show you a template I use all the time. And you can see there's these these square brackets in here. I use the square brackets to prompt myself to customize the template. So I would never send it verbatim as you're seeing it here. I would customize it. So one of the services I offer is one-on-one writing coaching. And some of the companies I work with, when an employee is either struggling or just wants to improve, they'll say to that employee, you can work with Leslie one-on-one writing coaching. This is the template I use for my first communication with the person I'm going to work with. So you could say, hey, that's a lot of nerve. You're using pre-written form letter for the very first time you communicate with someone you're going to coach. Coaching is quite a sincere activity. How could you use a template, which is not super sincere, to start something that is sincere? Well, I crafted the template carefully. I believe that it comes across as friendly and freshly written, even though it is a template, and it makes it possible for me to start the coaching earlier rather than reworking this template. So my subject line is a follow-up because the person who I'm working with was referred to me. I use their first name. That's my first prompt. Then I add, I'm glad, and then I put in the name of the person receiving the coaching's boss. In the first sentence, put you in touch with me. In the next sentence, I have to do is about 50% pre-written and 50% free texted. The pre-written, I'd be glad to provide one-on-one coaching. And then the second half, I'm going to write about the skills they want to improve. So the brackets prompt me to do that free texting. There's a little bit more free texting at the end of that paragraph because I'm offering dates to meet. And the rest of it, I just copy and paste and use as is. This template saves me time, and I know exactly what I'll do with the time that's saved. I'll get started on coaching the person more quickly. So that's a template that I use, and I'd like to show you some other types of templates. This template that I use is a full email. It's a soup to nuts, hat to slippers kind of an email. I've got everything from the subject line down to my signature. But most people find it easier to work with what I've called modular templates. Modular templates are smaller pieces of reusable writing, maybe not a whole entire email, but the paragraphs that will go into that email. So let me show you an example of customer communication. Here's an email from a customer. This would come into a contact center like the one I showed you in the photograph at the beginning of the webinar. This person named Eddie Grand has written to the pensions department at the corporation where he works, and he has a question he needs help with. I've applied for a pension. I thought I'd sent you everything you need to process my pension, but now you tell me you need a status medical report. What is a status medical report? So that's what the customer is asking. And here's the email that he received from the customer service specialist. This email is a great model, and I hope you can see the modules of template. So if you have questions, that little paragraph is its own template. When do we need the SMR? Is its own small template. What is an SMR, a status medical report? That's a template. And at the very top of the email, this writer has prepared a bluff paragraph. So in that very first paragraph, there's a thank you. He explains what the SMR is. He says that he also lists the important action. Once you receive the SMR, we'll be able to decide whether you're eligible for a pension. So we have 4 paragraphs, and we have in this communication 3 templates. 4 paragraphs. That bluff paragraph was handwritten, but the rest of it is probably small templates combined for a good answer. In this case, I have marked the parts with background color that are certainly free texted, and as you can see, not so much of this required free text. There's a little bit. For example, the person who used these templates, John Hansen, added the deadline for the SMR in the 3rd paragraph. In the If You Have Questions section, the writer added the overall task that this Mr. Grand wants to accomplish so that he free texted a little bit. But by showing you the parts that are free texted here, I want to convey that a communication is a hybrid. It's a mix of templated and free texted. It doesn't have to be either or. And even in customer service contact centers, that's how they use templates. Here's an example of a modular template, and this comes from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's Trademark Assistance Center. If you write them an email and you ask them, how much does it cost to apply for a trademark, this little block of writing is what they have in their database and what their customer service agents will use to answer your question. This is how they will reply to you. In the old version, we had a not customized template, a not modular template. We had a whole block of writing which we would have a difficult time altering or copying and pasting into a response to a customer. So part of successful communication that uses templates is making sure that the templates themselves are easy to use and easy to read. Here is the same exact answer as we're seeing here. This is the old version. So let me show you what this template looks like in a successful response. Here's an email from a customer. His name is Jason Wilson, and he's asking about how much a trademark costs because he has this great idea of T-shirts with built-in speakers, and he doesn't want anyone to rip off his great idea. Here's the template. As I showed you before, these are all the different costs for applying for a trademark and all the different prices. And here I can show you how the customer service writer used this template. Again, my thesis is your response needn't be all template or all free text, clearly. So the bluff paragraph, the opening paragraph, is free texted. Thank you for contacting us about applying for a trademark for your idea, your business idea. Like most entrepreneurs, you're wise to protect your business, and here's how much it costs to do so. Then we see the template, and Jane Doe closes the writing. Completing your trademark application may be a bit time-consuming, but it will ease your worries. Best of luck with your business. So here's a nice mix of free text and templated writing that provides a good communication, a high-quality communication. So if you're thinking that using templates would be a good idea for you, here's how to survey your outbox to see what might be, which types of emails might be well suited to a template. Look at your outbox, just kind of wander through there and identify the emails that took you a long time to write, because those are ones you say, hey, how could I make this shorter? Identify topics you write about repeatedly. Clearly those are candidates for templates. And identify emails where you're already copying and pasting, either from your agency's website or a report or whatever. If you're already copying and pasting, then you're probably close to having a reusable template, and just a little bit more finishing might bring you to the point where you have a great template you can use over and over. Okay? And with that, here is my contact information, and again, I will take a deep breath and ask you, do you have any questions I can answer?
Thanks so much, Leslie. This has been very interesting. And folks, if you have any questions, we've just got a few more minutes left on the webinar, so please go ahead and send those along in your questions box. I do have two here. One is actually more of a comment. I see that the emails that you're showing as the prime examples are formatted more like a document. Could you comment briefly on formatting an email to make it more effective?
Yes, indeed. That's an interesting comparison or connection you made. Readers will scan whatever they have to read. Scanning is a highly evolved, practical reading behavior, and no matter what they're reading, people are going to try to scan it. So if you don't give them scannable features, you're going to short circuit their reading strategy. So even though the emails you mentioned, they look like documents, I would replace that with they're scannable. And emails are formal, meaningful communications that drive our business all day long, and they need to be scannable also. There's no way to write a 3-paragraph email without scannable features in it, and those include headings, white space, and vertical lists of either bullets or numbers.
Great, thanks. I have another question here. Storing your templates, since email is so, come and go, do you have any suggestions for how to store templates to make them easy to access? Are there any tricks that you use in that area?
Well, you're absolutely right. When you have templates, you basically have knowledge base, and when you have a knowledge base, the first decision you make is, how do I name these and how do I store them? So, of course, you could store them as separate or collected Word files if you want. A quick cheat that some people use is they store their short templates as signature blocks in Outlook. You can have, infinite number of signature blocks, and you can use 2 or 3 of them or 4 of them as you need when you're sending a response. So that's a cheaty way to do it. But I think if you have 10 little templates or 10 medium-sized templates, probably you could manage them in Outlook that way as separate signatures.
Great, that's an interesting tip. Lori Mayer says she has no questions, but this is refreshing to hear. It seems so simple, and it's amazing so many people make it complicated.
Amen, sister.
And that's so funny. And then finally, Elizabeth Rowe, I think, speaks for all of us when she says, "Thank you, Leslie. It's a great training as always. We are very glad that you're." Bethany says, "We're glad you're a friend of NAGC. We all hope, I think, that we get to see you at another communications school in the near future." And if there's no other questions, I think we could go ahead and close out with a big round of applause for a terrific presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you have a great fall afternoon, and thank you for joining.
Thank you. And everybody, we'll see you on in November for Encore at 1 p.m. And until then, enjoy the last of the beautiful October weather. All right, see you again in November. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.